to tread very carefully in that, not only because of the ethical questions that she had, constantly to make sure that as a marginal community to be careful how she does the questioning and so on, but also because of the repression and restrictions imposed by the Bangladeshi government that controls the camps. But Ibtisam managed to navigate through all these levels of, walking on eggs, as they say, quite brilliantly. So without further ado, Ibtisam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Randa, so much. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yep. I can hear you.
Okay. Hi all, good afternoon. Before I start my presentation, I just want to say that as a person of color, a student residing and working in Canada, I stand before you mindfully about my positionality. I live and work on the traditional lands of Indigenous people, acknowledging the structural inequalities embedded in settler colonialism. Working closely with Rohingyas, those who were uprooted from their country, I recognize the profound connection between people and their lands. As an anthropology student, my goal is to raise awareness and contribute to dismantling settler colonial structures. That being said, I begin my presentation today. First of all, it's an honor and privilege to be able to present my research in front of you all. I finished my research in August 2023, and since then, I'm working on organizing my field data. So this is a work in progress, so please feel free to share your feedback with me. Today, I will share with you a brief history on Rohingya displacement, what led me to problematize my research questions. Then I will reflect on my research methods. Preliminary findings will follow after that with a concluding remark. First, who are the Rohingyas? Historically, the Rakhine state of Myanmar has been home of the Muslim Rohingyas for centuries. The word Rohingya came from Rohang, which is the ancient name of Rakhine, and they have been living there since the 15th century. For the purpose of today's discussion, I have divided the Rohingya history into three segments. The Rohingyas in pre-colonial Myanmar, Rohingyas under British colonialism, and Rohingyas in independent Myanmar. Rohingyas identify themselves as descendants of Arakan Kingdom and consider Rakhine State as their homeland. The Arakan region's proximity to the coastline made it a hub for cross-boundary trades, attracting Arab and Bengal Sultanate settlers during the 7th century, a time when Islam was also spreading in that region. The new settlers later referred to themselves as Rohingya or Rohingya, the vernacular term, which means that Muslim soldiers who settled in Arakan. Historical records indicate that different races, religions, and ethnicity peacefully coexisted in Burma from the 11th century to the end of 18th century. Buddhism was the official religion of Burma, but the kings welcomed Muslims in their kingdoms, allowing them to serve in the military and local governing bodies. During this period, Muslims and Buddhists coexisted harmoniously, engaging in political and economic exchanges among different ethnic communities. Then there is British colonialism. Burma experienced a demographic shift influenced by British occupation in 19th century. The British not only invaded Burmese territories, but also disrupted the traditional Burmese Buddhist belief system that were upheld by kings for centuries. After gaining control in 1885, the British encouraged migration from China and India, particularly in Rakhine. This led to Buddhists losing their local roles, causing frustration and anger. Nationalistic narratives emerged, labeling Rohingya communities along with recent Indian arrivals as foreigners. Well, British administrators did not establish a clear ethnic or occupational statuses for migrants, recording them as either Burmese or Indian in the census. Therefore, it later legitimized efforts to exclude the Rohingyas from constitutional rights in independent Myanmar. The British also used a divide and rule policy, which divided Myanmar in two parts. The place Burmese and Buddhists live were named as Upper Burma, and the most non-Buddhist and non-Burmese groups were living in the periphery. At the end of this period, tensions escalated due to the need of Myanmar to be a pure Buddhist nation and the impact of World War II. In the independent Myanmar, the British rulers' hasty decisions in Myanmar led to long-lasting peril for non-Burmese and non-Buddhist people. Muslim leaders were seen as new colonizers carrying the legacy of imperial power. In the 20th century, violent attacks on Rohingyas became common in independent Myanmar. The changing citizenship acts in Myanmar have significantly impacted the Rohingya population, leading to exclusion and statelessness. Upon several changes to citizenship acts, the 1982 Citizenship Law of Myanmar had a major impact, introducing citizenship types based on heritage, where Rohingyas lacked necessary documentation due to the colonial period, intentionally excluding them and maintaining statelessness. The exodus of Rohingyas from Myanmar to Bangladesh began in 1972, with Cox's Bazar being the preferred destination for these refugees, as it is the closest location and connecting two countries. The other routes led them to Thailand and Indonesia. From 2015 to 2017, the largest refugee waves occurred, resulting 700,000 Rohingyas fleeing Myanmar and seeking refuge in Bangladesh. In 2023, the Rohingyas outnumbered the local population. In this displaced context, UNHCR usually suggests this following solution. However, in Bangladesh, the Rohingya discussion on repatriation comes repeatedly than any other solution because others are not welcomed or an option. Given this background on the Rohingyas and considering the present situation, there is an intricate avenue to discuss and understand the politics over lives. Therefore, I wanted to look at how do different actors perceive repatriation. What do Rohingyas think of a safe place and where do they want to live? Then how humanitarian authority is reproduced in displaced context, and to what extent does the host country's policy regarding displaced people affect and shape their experiences? I did my research in Cox's Bazar in the southeast region of Bangladesh. My fieldwork involved various areas in the city and nearby villages, particularly Ukhia, Walukhali, Bazar. And I have worked in KRC, Camp 4, Camp 5, 7, 9, and Camp 8, total of 16 camps, one of which was registered camp and others were unregistered camp. Given this complexity of the Rohingya context and multiple stakeholders involved, I had to travel different places, meet people from various backgrounds, also in different settings. So I employed a multi-setted ethnographic approach. I did participant observation, interviews, discussion, and group discussions with different stakeholders, oral history interviews of Rohingyas and local Bangladeshis. During my research, I interacted and collaborated with around 53 individuals, including 10 government officials, 12 humanitarian workers, 8 local Bangladeshis, and 23 Rohingyas. The following areas emerged from my fieldwork collaborations. So the complex realities of humanitarianism, bureaucracy in camp and Rohingya experiences, the coexistence of Rohingya and Bangladesh citizens inside of camp to understand camp geography, concepts of home and homeland in relation to changing political and socioeconomic conditions. Various theories and scholarly discussions shaped my findings profoundly. For instance, concepts like humanitarian intervention, humanitarian fable, humanitarian governance, bare life, refugee leveling, criminality, campscape, bureaucracy in camp, memory, and graduate sovereignty. This kind of concepts significantly shaped my research. Before I dive into further discussion, let me briefly introduce you to the organogram of authoritative institution. The Bangladesh government management structure is hierarchical, with ministries extending to the tertiary level. They collaborate with the humanitarian stakeholders essentially for strategy formulation, while INGO and NGOs are responsible for implementation. What is important here to note that humanitarian organizations typically adapt their emergency interventions to align with host countries' demand and policies. For example, IOM, in managing Rohingya people, the organization referred the community as undocumented Myanmar nationals, a classification that supports Bangladesh's stand on this issue. Therefore, the complex reality of humanitarianism became an important avenue for discussion. So First of all, humanitarianism is a complex ethical doctrine that underpins a specific group of international organizations' commitment uh, in eliminating global human suffering. Humanitarian work is carried out within a specific framework that adheres to principles such as neutrality, impartiality, independence, and humanity. These principles form an ethical and moral foundation for humanitarian efforts like decision making, resource allocation, engagement with affected communities, in this case, the Rohingyas and the local Bangladeshis. It creates a humanitarian space which covers the condition and circumstances that enable these organizations to operate independently. But the nature of humanitarianism is often based on these features are depicted as noble endeavors, leading a new norm of international affairs and enabling states and organizations to showcase their values and altruism. But in reality, the humanitarian ability is questioned as we see how their regulatory measures impact the Rohingya lives. For example, WFP reduced the monthly allowance for the Rohingyas from $12 to $10 without any prior notice, which later was reduced to $8 until last year. So what we can see that non-state actors play a profound role in deciding the value of a life. The complex humanitarian realities include concepts like humanitarian governance involved in the complex relationship between state and non-state actors in managing the crisis. As Bangladesh has constantly stated their desire that Rohingyas need to return to their homeland in Myanmar, the primary goal here is to ensure that Rohingyas do not become too comfortable or do not forget their desire to return home. They are constantly being reminded of their temporary stay in Bangladesh, pushing them in a distress where they are unsure of a safe home or whether Myanmar is going to welcome them or not. Besides this, there are other areas to look into to understand the politics of repatriation. Since Rohingyas' entry to Bangladesh, they are fragmented into two levels: the registered Rohingyas and the unregistered, forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals. The registered Rohingyas came to Bangladesh in or before 1992. Along with their registered identities, a few of them managed to forge Bangladeshi national IDs, send their kids to school, or own shops in local market. The FDMNs, on the other hand, came to Bangladesh in 2017 or later. They live in an $8 allowance provided by WFP. They don't have much side hustles like the registered refugees, but due to increased price of forged documents, they are unable to buy them. Despite these differences, there is a similarity. Both are separated from the Bangladeshi citizens by a fenced wire, the literal establishment of camp. Camp creates a division between citizens and refugees by establishing a space where refugees or displaced people are subjected to a state of exception, which means legal and political norms are suspended, leading to the exclusion and marginalization of refugees in the camp. Sovereign powers can randomly designate rules over these people, who stands out as what stands out as a bureaucracy in camp in my research. It reflects on how state administers the refugees through its bureaucratic practices, governance, and oversight of the actors involved. For instance, government bodies determine who can enter and exit camp, who can work in the camp, dictates the way they work, and instructs that schools in camp should not teach Bangla to Rohingya children, all echoing the sovereign point of view. There are numerous obligations that refugees must adhere in order to live in the camp, as so do other actors who regularly work there. This situation is both intricate and sensitive, right? While many Rohingyas are just trying to survive their lives as is, a few of them are trying to make the most of their lives in this situation. But some Rohingyas in the camp, particularly the youth, are trying to find ways to minimize the effects of these bureaucratic practices. Their numbers are few, of course, but they are trying to navigate the bureaucracy by finding loopholes in systematic structures, such as hiding identity in mainstream Bengali community, adopting make-believe attitude, etc. For example, we see that a Rohingya youth here hides his identity in school as getting caught as Rohingya will put his future in jeopardy. Therefore, they are always on high alert and often remain silent, as their fear is that they might be targeted and killed. Ultimately, many of my research collaborators feel there is no end in sight to this crisis, and they do not believe they can return to Myanmar, and there is no future. This leaves them a state of uncertainty. It shows that Rohingyas live in a liminal phase as an ambiguous and temporary state between two well-defined conditions, where social structures and identities dissolve. Well, next what comes is that in the camp, in the last 6 years, the demography of Cox's Bazar has changed. It is now a cosmopolitan hub where people across the globe are residing temporarily. In turn, it has created a tension among the communities. The price hike, increasing rents are making lay people's life difficult. While the tension between host and guest community is a prominent discussion, during my fieldwork, I came across a scattered presence of Bangladeshi households in the camp who are referred to as forcibly incorporated citizens in the camp. It led me to critically reflect on the camp geography and examine the host-guest dynamics. Well, the camp geography is Bangladesh is unique. During the neighboring setting of Rohingyas and the Bangladeshis, the definition of camp has the potential to change its feature. It escapes the modern illusion of creating a homogeneous space and brings heterogeneity to the camp. Therefore, it means that over a longer period of time, the space of exception leaks through the camp and starts to affect local peoples, which is known as the campscape. Well, before I move any further, I want to clarify that the struggles of Rohingyas and Bangladeshi locals are not interchangeable. However, I wanted to see the host community's view on Rohingya presence. Because there is a growing sentiment of Rohingya, anti-Rohingya sentiment, and I came across that there's the strong sentiment travels and fades as we go from the city area to the camp area, while the city dwellers are share a strong view against Rohingya presence. They refer them as criminals and kind of contaminating the local areas. As we travel to the suburbs, it changes to receiving aids and concerns of people's well-being. While we go to the camp area and talk to the people who are living inside camp, it says that they are much more concerned about their safety and security in everyday life. Perhaps the space of exception has affected the marginal lives in this case. Well, the Rohingya camp itself is a complex political space, and their extended stay in Bangladesh complicates the concept of home and homeland. Home is typically associated with familiarity with people and place, and it is a space where everyday life discourses unfold. Homeland, on the other hand, represents a collective imagination with a notion of belonging. What I gathered from fieldwork is that concepts of home and homeland are not absolute, but rather influenced by a number of factors that includes generation, gender, family background, time of displacement, present experience in the camp, etc. For example, here one generation of Rohingya women who lives in the camp grew up outside of the camp in the suburban areas in Kolatoli. She shares a particular notion of home where she belongs to that particular place where she grew up. On the other hand, when the first generation FDMNs who recently moved to Bangladesh considers their Myanmar as their home because it has a family tie and memories associated with it. Well, before I draw into conclusion, perhaps a short composition for my Rohingya friends would be a better way to present how to think of their displaced condition. This is a song and it is translated and closed captioned for your reference. I have blurred out the identifiable objects.
Andrea, do we have the share sound set up on Zoom for the computer?
She needs to check the box at her own.
Oh, I think you can't hear the music, right?
Yeah. Do you want to try? So Lisa,
It's just that when you share your screen, there's a box that says share audio. You need to check that box. But you'd have to unshare and then reshare in order to do that.
Well, I think I can find the option here. Sorry about that. But the music, it's the song itself says that Rohingya people are waiting for a solution for a long time. Everyone knows about their condition, but still they are in a disarray, and they don't see any future for themselves. So all that being said, I want to say that Rohingya context is very intricate. So so is their future. There is a risk of persecution if repatriated to Myanmar, while life in camp is criminal. They have no legal status except that their status as refugees or displaced person. They cannot integrate in Bangladesh society and is also not allowed or nor is receiving resettlement. So conception of homeland are also suspended. When they are challenged in every avenue, including but not limited to humanitarian context, host countries' reception, Myanmar's unwelcoming activities, and then everyday politics of life, what painfully stands out is that along with their homeland, their future is also on hold. So that being said, that's the summary of my research that I've been working on. I want to thank you, thank all of you. I thank you, Randa, for your continuous support. Thank you to Andrew Walsh and Nandi Bhatia for your kind support during my research. The awesome anthropology department at Western has my heart. Thank you, my friends and collaborators from the fieldwork. Without your help, nothing would have been possible. I'm thankful to my friends and family, my father, Rashid, my sisters, and my friends, both in Bangladesh and Canada. The funding bodies, of course. Thank you, everyone. So now if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
I'll keep an eye out for questions online.